So this is my fifth time trying to start filming this video now, and to be honest, there doesn't feel like any type of good way to start it. And we all know that I'm really horrible at intros anyways, so I especially don't know how to start this video. And so I'm just gonna do it. Now, you guys can tell by the title of the video, and you know if you saw my last day in my life, that we actually miscarried our baby at 10 weeks. Now, I wasn't sure that I was going to tell this story, but as I've sat with it, actually it was 2 weeks yesterday that I passed our baby, I have really felt this overwhelming desire to share the story with you guys for a few different reasons that will become more evident even as I tell the story. It's really a trip because I never thought I would miscarry. Does anyone? I don't know. My mom never miscarried. Neither of my grandmothers ever miscarried. So because of that, it's not something that is super common in my family, and it's not something that's been talked about very much because it wasn't really an experience in my close family. And that actually goes into part of this story as well that we're not gonna touch on now. But what an experience. And I think after my last pregnancy, there was a small part of me that almost took life for granted, if that's the way to word it. You know, I was really struggling in these last few weeks just in my early pregnancy, as I'm going to talk about. It was really, really hard. I've used the words survival mode a few times to different friends. I really felt like I was in survival mode, and I was really honestly very miserable just physically. I felt like I was a horrible parent, a horrible wife, just a horrible friend. Just all of it kind of went down the tubes when I got pregnant because I felt so sick. I transitioned into survival mode, and I don't fault myself because it really was survival mode, but partially because of that, this pregnancy did not get the same pampering or just circumstances, honestly, at all as when I was pregnant with Logan. The circumstances were completely different. But yeah, just didn't expect it because not only, like I said, do miscarriages they're not something that has been common in my close family. I had never miscarried, obviously. And then, like I mentioned, I was so sick. And typically that's kind of the thing that's said to women when they're in pregnancy, that it's a really good sign if you're sick because the hormones are still kind of raging and pumping and things are still changing. And I was very sick this time. I want to say I was more sick than I was in my first pregnancy. I don't know if that's hindsight because of how things ended up, but I think I was. And I think that it made the sickness even harder to deal with because of everything I mentioned. Just feeling like I was in survival mode, trying to move in, and taking care of a toddler is a totally different ball game when you're pregnant, obviously. And I knew that going in, but it was really, really hard. So I want to share my story today because of really my experience through all of this. And hearing other women's stories, it's made me want to tell my story. Now, when this all unfolded, one of the layers of things I was concerned about was telling people that I miscarried. It feels, even though, okay, so there's a saying I've told you guys before. My old therapist back in the day used to say, emotions come in sets of 3. And really what that means is there's many layers of emotions to an experience. And one of those layers was this feeling of shame and embarrassment for a lot of different reasons. That's also very layered. And also because of negative experiences I had on the internet in general in the last year, I was really concerned. I didn't know how people were going to respond. And what I found through sharing was that it's been the exact opposite of what I expected. The support, the overwhelming support and prayers and stories that I've gotten back, that I've gotten to hear, and the way I've gotten to connect with women through this has been really incredible. So because of that, I am in the place now where I really want to share my story. Now, another reason I want to share is because even though I did not take to YouTube when this all happened, because I was in denial and I didn't want to believe that that was what was happening, I can see why other people would take to YouTube. And in my case, I actually had my sister-in-law kind of holding my hand through this. She was like I don't even know, man, my guardian angel through this process, because she had actually miscarried 3 months ago, 3 months prior to me miscarrying. And You know, she was so sweet and supportive when I initially started bleeding, which is what we'll talk about. By the way, this video is going to get like graphic. I am going to share details because a big part of why I feel you'll hear my situation maybe went a certain way, in a way that I'm grateful for, is because of my sister-in-law and her sharing her experience with me. It gave me an idea of what was to come and how I could best handle it for my personality. And like I said, I'll share the timeline more. You'll hear the details as we go forward. But that is also a motivating factor, is hopefully sharing and being with someone, if you're in this situation right now, letting you know potentially what's to come, letting you know you're not alone. I actually have watched videos since I miscarried, but I did not before, and I did not when I was going through it. But since I've miscarried, I've watched videos, and I was watching one this morning, and I was crying because the emotions were so relatable. The experience was so relatable, and there really is, like, I don't know, camaraderie, just support and comfort in hearing other women's stories and knowing that you're not alone. And I know everybody says that you're not alone. This is common. But I want to add to that. I guess I want to share my experience as well. In hopes to all of the things I just said: prepare, support, comfort someone who may be watching this. I'm gonna just jump right in. You guys know I have been very sick for the last, pretty much since I got pregnant. Right away, pretty much right after I tested positive, within days, my sickness ramped up. Now, side note, if you guys are really watching my videos, you know that I've actually been dealing with some nausea for the last couple months. But when I became pregnant, the nausea increased, and it became like, oh, I'm pregnant nauseous. It's actually why some of you thought I was pregnant initially when I wasn't, because of the nausea I'd been dealing with. But when I got pregnant, the nausea kicked in days later. Now, during my last pregnancy, I was sick the entire time. And so even though everyone says every pregnancy is different, there is part of me that expected to be like fully sick. And I was super sick from the get-go. And like I said, in some ways I was almost more sick than I was my first time. I had a lot of sleepless nights, a lot of nights where I could kind of soothe the nausea by choking down a larger meal before going to bed. And then I would wake up around honestly, sometimes it'd be like 11, 1, 3. Sometimes I could kind of, like I said, go back to sleep in little chunks. And then other times I would be up most of the night from like 11 or midnight to like 5 or 6 a.m. And then I'd fall asleep for a little bit and then wake up shortly after Logan and Dan. So it was really, really rough. And like when I would be up in the middle of the night, I'd be like puking in the shower. So I was very sick, very tired. Being pregnant and that sick is really hard. And when it is day after day after day, there hits a point where you're like, I'm so grateful, but you're just blinded by like discomfort. So I was really uncomfortable. Now, I had a little bit of a different pregnancy than a lot of the stories that I've seen about miscarriages, because I don't have a lot of doctor's info to report, because I never was connected with an OB. Right after we tested positive, I immediately called a midwifery place out here, because word on the street is like midwives are in like high demand and short supply. So I called that week, and we went in and we toured the place because we're new to the area. So we hadn't, seen the facility or met anyone. We went in and it was amazing. I mentioned in our pregnancy announcement that the women that I met there gave off like the same vibes as my last midwife. Everyone just had like angelic vibes about them. And I loved it. And so we secured our midwife place, and with them, you don't actually go into your first appointment until you are 12 weeks, which I was actually supposed to be 12 weeks here in a couple of days, as of like right now when I'm filming. But with them, you don't go in until you are 12 weeks. So you're going into your second trimester. Now, I could have gotten an ultrasound beforehand, but you guys know I have kind of like some weirdly crunchy ways about me. We won't say weirdly, but to some of you, it would be weirdly crunchy ways. And what I mean by that is, even during this pregnancy, our goal was to only have one ultrasound, and that was going to be at 20 weeks, which was actually required by our midwife place. by our midwifery place. I don't know what to call it, but we had wanted to do it at 20 weeks just because for me, I felt like I wanted to know like that the anatomy was all in the right place for our home birth, because that is what we hope to do with all of our births, God willing that he gives us another child and we can do that. So we only wanted to do 20 week. Last time we did 5 weeks to see Logan's heart, and then we did the 20 for the anatomy. And this time I only wanted to do 20 because there's some debate out there around ultrasound and just how good or not it is for mama and the baby. So that's why I say weirdly crunchy, because some people will really disagree with that, but we had decided to not get an ultrasound. Now, I say all of that for reasons you'll hear in the story. So, on a Thursday, I had crossed the 10-week mark. Now that week, I had been battling a pretty severe, like, cold flu situation. And that's actually the second cold flu cough that I have actually had this year. I got really sick right after Logan's birthday in January, and so did Logan. Right around the time, actually, we think that we conceived. And then I was really sick, like I mentioned, the week I miscarried, which was about 2.5 weeks ago, was when the sickness was in effect. And I went to sleep one night and I was running a fever and my back was really aching. And I woke up in the middle of the night and the fever was gone and the back pain was gone. And honestly, the nausea was different. That's pretty much when it changed, and I knew it. And I had started thinking that the nausea was changing, but because I was at 10 weeks, I had really hoped and kind of honestly just assumed, even though there was a small part of me that was concerned. Hindsight changes things, by the way. So some of the things I look back on, I'm like, did I feel that way? Or am I like projecting that now back in the past? But I think I was a little concerned, just because, like I said, I know all pregnancies are different, but I was nauseous the entire time. And it felt like it had lightened up a significant amount. And I had actually said something to Dan, and Dan was like, dude, you're still nauseous. Like, I heard you up last night gagging in the toilet, because I was still up in the middle of the night gagging in the toilet. And I said to him, yes, I know, but it's different. Something is different. And we had just hoped that difference was that I was about to go into the second trimester, and maybe this time it was going to be easier. So, I want to say that I had broken that fever around Tuesday or Wednesday, and stuff started to feel different. And I'm not, by the way, in saying that, I'm not necessarily inferring anything like the fever is what caused the miscarriage or anything like that. But make what you want of it. That's part of the story. I'm just going to tell the timeline, how it unfolded. So yeah, that was like Tuesday, Wednesday. Thursday is when I crossed 10 weeks. And then on Friday, I was really thinking a lot about like, man, this nausea is changing. And he's right. He was right. I was still nauseous. I was still gagging. And he kept saying that to me. And I'm like, but I'm telling you, the gags, it feels different. It was like when I was pregnant, the nausea was very distinct. It was almost like its own physical moving thing. It would be like an ocean, or it'd sound like a hunger, like, and you could hear it. And it was like, oh, I'm going to puke. Like it was like its own moving thing. And it was like, as those days went on, that stopped and it became more of a vague nausea versus that very distinct thing that was causing me nausea. I don't mean thing like the baby. I'm talking about thing like the nausea being its own like thing in my body. It was like it changed. And it was really weird because Friday I messaged a friend and I didn't want to be like ominous, and so I didn't say that. And I didn't think this was what was going to happen. But I had said to her, like, yeah, I mean, my nausea is actually kind of changing and lightening up. Like, I had not gotten back to this friend for a minute. And so I was like, sorry, I've been like in the pits of nausea, despair. So I'm getting back to you now. She got back to me about 15 minutes later, and I pressed play on the voice message and I sat down to go pee, and I put the phone on the counter so it would play on speaker and I could hear it. And she was saying to me in the message that she was, glad to hear from me. She wanted to see me soon, and that she was glad my nausea was lifting. And it was like a movie. Like right when she said that, I wiped, and when I wiped, blood came on the toilet paper. And that really startled me, because my last pregnancy, I never had any bleeding, any spotting, nothing. And that was actually, if you know my labor and delivery story, that was actually kind of how I knew I was going into labor. I had the blood before I had the cramps, and I just knew it. I was like, I'm far enough along. this is what's happening. I'm going into labor. And so you can imagine when I wiped, it really freaked me out. And I instantly just like, I actually instantly proclaimed, I was like, no. And I just started, really getting worked up pretty fast. And at this point, it's kind of a blur. I don't remember like if I think I called for Dan. That's right. I think he was at my parents' house. I called for him. He came back over. I told him. And we just tried to stay calm. And at that point, I think I started telling different friends. I told my sister-in-law. I think she was one of the first people I told. And, started getting feedback from people. That's when people started really bringing up things like subchorionic hematomas, things like, weak uterine walls, things like low progesterone. I had talked to friends who had felt like they had basically stopped miscarriages by using progesterone cream. I talked to other friends who had used herbs like cramp bark to slow down cramping depending on what was going on. And of course, I wanted to try all of those things. I wanted to hope for all of those things. But deep down, I knew and I felt like this isn't a good or a normal situation. And obviously bleeding in pregnancy is never normal. They'll never classify that as normal, but it could be something else. But in this case, I just felt like it wasn't. So Friday and Saturday are a bit of a blur to me. I was very concerned. I was very in a fog, about what was going on. Like I said, I had a handful of friends that were trying to really like support and encourage me and help me figure out what was going on. Now at this point, like I mentioned, I had not been in for an appointment with my midwife yet, but they were still like slated to be my midwife. So I called the facility, and at first I was so out of it, I actually accidentally left a number on like their general facilities hotline, which was like not gonna get to them because they were closed like through the weekend, but I wasn't even thinking straight. Now thankfully, one of the midwives actually went into the birthing center over the weekend and heard my voice message and then called me back, and I was very grateful for that because like I said, I was just very flighty and all over the place and kind of panicking and trying to care for myself and talking to friends and trying different things and debating on an ultrasound. And that's where I mentioned earlier the whole weirdly crunchy thing. There was part of me in the moment that was like, well, I don't know what's going on. Like, what if my baby's weak and potentially dying, and then I go and zap them with all these sound waves, and then it's like a whole other problem. Like I really just felt compelled to wait and to not do that. And I know that sounds really weird, and that's why I used the word weirdly crunchy in the beginning. But that's what I felt compelled to do, was to just wait it out and see what happened. And so it was a long, like Friday and Saturday were very long. It was a lot of tears, a lot of debate, fear, confusion, and just uncertain about what was going to happen. Now, Sunday, we went over to my parents' house for a bonfire, and I was sitting on a chair at my parents' house by the bonfire, and the cramps were starting to increase. And, it's interesting because similar to birth, I didn't really know if the pain that I was feeling, if I was like being dramatic, like overplaying the pain, but it started to feel pretty serious in the afternoon. And I remember looking at my mom across from the fire, and I just was like, I'm so nervous, Mom. And she was like, it's okay. You're going to know by tomorrow. Like, you just need to rest the rest of the day. And what she's referring to is I had this whole ultrasound debate in my head over the weekend. We had actually scheduled an ultrasound for Saturday, and I canceled it at the last minute because I was like, like I said, I was just concerned, and I didn't want to zap my baby, and it was the decision I made. And so we decided to wait it out. And so this was Sunday afternoon. My mom said, you'll know tomorrow, because we had rescheduled an appointment for Monday, because after I sat on it, then I started to doubt myself, and I was like, maybe we should go in Monday. And they had an appointment, and so they booked it for us. So my mom says that to me, and I looked at her and I was just like, yeah, well, no. And I just felt really scared suddenly. Like it was like something kind of went down my body, and I was just like, I don't want to miscarry this baby tonight. Like it was like leaving their house was like kind of like being like, bye, I'm gonna go home for the night now. That's what it felt like. And it was just like knowing, I don't know, next time I saw them, I might have miscarried. I don't know. It was this weird feeling. And so I said, all right, I'm gonna go back home because I'm starting to really hurt. And I got up and I left. And as I was walking home, some of the cramps actually got so severe. And really what hurt was like, almost like my pee hole hurt. Like I was pushing something out of my pee hole. And as I was walking, sorry, I should be calling my urethra hole. I think that's the proper name. I don't know. As I was walking, I'm like looking at my garage door because I got to the front of my garage door and I almost screamed for my family because it was such a severe cramp. But then, you know, it eased up. And like I said, I always have that side of me that's like, am I being dramatic? Like in everything. You guys know we didn't call the midwife till the last minute when I was giving birth because I just didn't know. And that's how I felt with that. Like, am I being dramatic? And I got into the house and I immediately had to go lay down. And when I laid down, I was like, okay, the cramping is picking up. And I went to go to the bathroom actually before I laid down and I noticed that there was more blood. And so I messaged my sister-in-law and I told her, I said, the cramping is definitely picking up. Like it's coming a lot more and I'm bleeding more. And through the whole weekend, she had been, like I said, so supportive and trying to help me, you know, I don't even know, think about the other things that it could be and, you know, not dwell on that. But at that point, she knew and she said to me, you know, basically something along the lines of like, yeah, I mean, I think you're miscarrying. And basically I was like, yeah, I think that's what's happening too. And she was like, do you want me to tell you what's going to happen now? Because she had not, you know, told me really the details the whole time, probably just to preserve my mental sanity going through it. And I also didn't ask like, hey, tell me all the details. But at this point, she's like, do you want me to tell you what you're probably about to go through? And my heart sank because I knew at that point I needed to know. And so I said yes. And she graciously sent me, you know, multiple voice messages explaining what she went through and what I would be walking into. And I was lying in the bed and feeling a lot of cramping. Now, also, here's the thing too. My sister-in-law had told me at this point, you need to put a pad in because this could surprise you and it could be a lot of blood. And that's kind of what had happened to her. I mean, I'm not here trying to tell her story and it's a whole separate thing. But she was like, you don't want to be, like, it can be a lot and surprising. And so I had also put a pad in at that point. But the cramping increased and all of a sudden, because of all of the information she had given me and then just sitting with my body for a minute, it's like all her messages had come in and it snapped. I knew it. And I said, my family has to take Logan. And so I messaged them and my brother came over and grabbed him. And I said, Dan, you have to draw a bathtub. And so he went and he filled up the tub. And Dan this whole time had been very like optimistic, optimistic is a good word. Like, you know, we don't know what's happening. You don't need to worry. There's so many other things that could be going on. And I was more the one that was like negative, if that's the word you want to use. And he's filling up the tub and I was lying in bed and I'm like moaning and crying. And I said to Dan, I'm like, Dan, I feel like I'm in labor. And that was the moment that I think it really like hit Dan, like locked in for him that was what was happening. And he came over and he put his hand on my back and he just said, baby, it's because you are in labor. You are, but we're going to get through this and I'm here and I'm not leaving you. And so that was definitely his moment for realizing like what was really happening. And him saying that was weirdly reassuring to me too, because it was like another person facing reality with me, that is what was happening. And so he filled up the tub. Now I have to say this, the tub being filled up, me having the pad, my parents taking Logan, it all came from my sister-in-law sharing with me her story, because I wouldn't have known what was coming and I probably would have been in denial still, or like, oh, it's not that big of a deal, or I don't know. Or like when I was at my mom's, like I mentioned, looking at her and being like, I don't want to miscarry tonight in my head. That was another like panicky thought I had, was like, what if this happens in the middle of the night? Like, I don't want to wake Logan up screaming and then it's like, oh, take him to my parents and we got to wake my whole family up. And like, but then on the flip side, I didn't want to do it all silently by myself because I didn't want to wake Logan up. Like, I wanted to just go through the experience with Dan and not by myself in the middle of the night. So we go back to saying, like, I don't know if someone watching this, if this is going to help someone, but I hope that that it will. I mean, I don't hope this situation on anyone, but I'm very grateful. I've said to so many people now that I feel like we were blessed with a good situation out of like a horrible, hard situation, because my sister-in-law told me what was coming. So yeah, Dan filled up the tub. You know, a lot of women they pass their babies, they pass a lot of blood in the toilet. And I had started passing a lot of blood in the toilet too. But like I said, it was almost like once she gave me a heads up and I knew what could be coming, I didn't want it to happen in the toilet at that point. And that's part of why I had Dan fill up the tub. Now, the other reason was because I was in so much pain, but it was really because once she had told me what was coming, I didn't want to lose the baby in the toilet. And so I stayed in bed on purpose with my legs closed, just lying and relaxing until the tub was full. And then, you know, I said to Dan, okay, I want to get straight in. And I got up and I got in the tub. And right when I climbed into the water, I just have to say this, instant pain relief, which on a side note, I'm like, that's why I really want to do a water birth if the Lord blesses us with another baby, because the pain relief was instant. And because of that, I was able to catch my breath for a moment, and Dan was too, because I had been kind of like crying and just a little hysterical, even going to the bathtub. And so he's kind of pulling things together and getting me water, and he's in the bathroom, and I say, you know, Dan, if I'm miscarrying, what's about to happen? Like, these cramps that I'm feeling, they felt so intense and violent. I was like, is my body like tearing apart the baby and it's going to come out in chunks? Is my body going to pass it as one whole piece? And Dan just said, I don't know, baby, I don't know. And he turned around to go get my water. Maybe that's what it was at that point. And I sat up in the tub. Now, I was still coming off being sick, but I had also been sobbing, so my nose was stuffed. And so I leaned forward to blow my nose. And when I blew my nose, stuff came flying out of me into the tub, and it was a lot. And I panicked and yelled for Dan. I was like, Dan, and he comes in, and it was a very similar shock actually to when I had Logan. If you guys have seen my birth video, you know that after I had Logan, I went into complete shock. Like, no, like I couldn't believe it, but it wasn't just, I can't believe it. It was like shock from hormones and everything. And that's what happened right after I had blown my nose and passed stuff. Now, I should just say it as it is, delivered my baby, because it wasn't just stuff that came out. I actually passed my baby. Now, this is where my story is a little different than some of the stories I had seen on YouTube, because I hadn't had an ultrasound prior to that. I had not even heard the baby's heartbeat. So I don't know, you know, I have opinions, which I'm going to tell you through the story, but I don't know if when the baby had passed, I don't know any of those details. But part of what had flown out of me was a sack with our baby in it. And it was exactly like the app had described. It was about this big, just like the app had said a 10-week baby would be. And it was fully in the sack. And when it came out of me, I couldn't believe it. Like I said, I was shocked. I literally wasn't processing what was in front of me. And I'm yelling, and Dan comes running in, and he goes, honey, that is the baby. That's the baby. And both of us were just like, and I'm like in the tub sitting there in shock, just like staring, and he's standing over me, looking down. And I don't know. I mean, time is really weird when you're in something like that, because I don't know how much time passed. It felt like maybe a couple minutes of his hand on mine and us just staring and calming down. And it took a few minutes to get the guts to pull the baby out of the tub, and which is what I wanted to do. You know, obviously the baby was there. We had to do something. After I'd composed myself and calmed down a bit, I mean, composure, it's a light word. I was crying through the whole thing. It's just, I wasn't losing it by that point. Dan helped me essentially scoop the baby out of the tub and bring the baby up into a little bowl that we had brought in from the kitchen and set it on the side of the tub. And we examined and just looked at our baby. And I was able to actually pick the baby up and feel both sides of the sac. You know, one side was perfectly smooth like glass, and then the other side, it felt like skin, kind of like a pruny hand after being in like a hot tub. And that's the side where you could see, you know, the baby in the sac. And Dan and I took a picture of the baby, and we were able to just have that time together with the baby. I'm not sure if I'm gonna keep this part in. This feels very personal, and the whole thing in general is personal. I had gone back and forth in the last week as to whether I wanted to share or not. Like I mentioned, all the reasons I wanted to share. It's almost, it feels like shameful saying this. I'm saying this, I guess, just for the sake of truth. But after Dan and I had spent a while with the baby and taken some pictures, you know, we weren't sure what to do. And that is a thread that I noticed runs common through every miscarriage story, regardless of how different the details are, regardless of how far along they were when they miscarried, is there's always this feeling, it seems, of like not being quite sure which decision to make and feeling like you have to decide fast. Like there's all this pressure and you're just like, what do I do? Whether people are at the doctor's or not. And, you know, Dan and I did not know we were going to miscarry. And so I just have to say that in retrospect, if we had known this part, I think it probably would have been different. But in the moment, it was very overwhelming. So after we spent our time with the baby and took our pictures, we didn't know what to do. It was this feeling of like, do you just take the baby off to the woods? Like, what do you do? We had never looked into what you do. And so even though I didn't want to lose the baby in the toilet because I wanted that time and I didn't want that taken away from me, we actually still ended up flushing the baby down the toilet. There was a lot of panic in the moment around like, what do you do? What do you do with that? And like I said, I think both of us in retrospect wish we had had more clarity and mental space and information, because I think we would have planted it. We would have planted the baby, and put something on top, like a bush or flowers or something. That being said, this whole thing, the whole miscarriage in general, even though it's upsetting, I have a lot of grace in my heart for myself and for Dan, because I know that we've just been doing our best, and it was surprising and overwhelming. And I actually am planning on planting some specific flowers for baby in the spring. I haven't decided which ones yet, but I want to plant something. And I guess I just share all that. That was really hard to say, but I share that specifically in the spirit of, there may be things you regret looking back, or things you wish you had known, or things you wish you could change, but you can't. You can't go back, first off. And second off, I think that it's really great to practice giving yourself grace, because truly I think we're all just trying our best. And B, there's something to learn from every situation, and I think I'll be processing and learning from this. Processing is a better word, for probably a long time. But yeah, I would call that the main part of the miscarriage, was what took place in the tub, because to me, actually passing the baby that was like the main part. It made sense once I passed why. I think me saying like my pee hole was hurting, I think that's the feeling of dilation. I think my cervix was dilating, and that's what I was feeling. And once I had passed the baby, my cramps were reduced by a large amount, 50 to 70%. Now, my sister-in-law told me that I would pass like 2 different swishes, like big clumps probably. And so the first one was the baby in the sac. And then later, and I, blurry, right? I don't remember if this part happened in the tub or if it happened in a pad because I actually ended up having 3 chunks that passed. The baby, the second chunk, which we believe was the placenta, and then a smaller piece of tissue, maybe that large, that we assumed had like broken off from the placenta. But those were kind of the main chunks I passed. And now I have another friend, unfortunately, that miscarried this last weekend. And I guess just to put it out there in terms of like what you might expect if you're dealing with this or you ever have this happen, it was the same thing for her. She delivered 2 chunks. It was the sac. Now for her baby had never grown, so it was just the sac, but she passed that. And then she passed the placenta as well, which looks way more like, at least for both of us, it looked way more like a brain, like thick brainy material. It was very weird. So I passed all of that within a few hours. So it was all done on Sunday, and lots of blood. Just like everyone says, lots of blood. Now, I maybe bled through my pants once, but it wasn't much. So I didn't have that experience of like a fire hydrant of blood everywhere. But I actually think that that's because, like I said, I was a little bit prepared for what was coming, and I got in the tub. And when I blew my nose and the baby came out, everything's more diluted, obviously, in large bodies of water, but I'm pretty sure that that would have been the fire hydrant of blood that everyone talks about. And after that, it was just like the heaviest period of my life for the following week or so. Now, yesterday was my 2-week mark as to when I passed the baby. So 17 days that I'd been bleeding, and I actually feel like I'm officially done as of yesterday. I'm still wearing a pad because it's been very shocking as to how long I have still had stuff going out of me. Like many times throughout this process, I would say to Dan, I think my bleeding is coming to an end. I think I'm done. And then I would just start bleeding more, and sometimes a lot more. And so it was a very surprising process. And I know women bleed for different lengths, but I guess just throwing it out there, if you're wondering, my bleeding, and now I really do think it's coming to an end. It'll be kind of weirdly funny if it's not, because I've been saying that so many times over the last couple weeks, and then it most definitely was not. But I actually feel confident now at this point that I really think I'm coming to an end, because it's been so, it's basically just been brown spotting now for the last 36 hours. So it's very light now. I've had basically 0 cramping for the last week and a half. The cramping tapered off. Like I said, a dramatic amount stopped after I delivered the baby and the placenta, but I was still cramping after that for a little while, getting rid of all the blood and all of that, maybe for another week or so. So one thing I want to say that I saw in someone else's video, actually in Becca Bristow's video, she mentioned how after she miscarried, the following nights, she was just up throughout the night crying. And that was my experience as well. I had already found, like I mentioned, my sleep was super messed with when I was pregnant. I was up basically every single night, puking and just couldn't sleep. And so I think a lot of it was hormonal, including the crying. Guys, I cried on and off nonstop for 4 days, maybe 3-4 days. It felt like the hormones that had been pulsing through my body, making me unbelievably sick and exhausted, were coming out through my eyeballs. I could not stop crying. Obviously the situation was sad and traumatic, and I couldn't believe that I had spent 5 weeks, 6 weeks, something like that, because we found out right away, barely functioning human, so sick, and it all ended up being for nothing. That was really a trip mentally, but it wasn't just that was making me cry, and I could feel it. It was literally hormonal and physical. Similarly, I was actually just telling a friend this morning, it was a similar feeling to my post-weaning depression that I dealt with when I came off of breastfeeding. I mentioned this in a podcast when I was still recording podcasts, and I hope to again one day. We'll see. It's actually my goal, but we're still, we're getting life set up. But in one of my podcasts, I had talked about dealing with that, with post-weaning depression, and it was so severe. That's similar to what this was. It was also very different, I will say that, but similar in the sense that it's the hormones, I could just feel them. And so I cried on and off nonstop, just couldn't believe it. And I would wake up, and I would just wake up and start crying in the middle of the night, and I would just shuffle to the kitchen, and I'd be sobbing, and I would make food. Now, this is really amazing, and I had some friends joke about this, that they were they felt like God had given them the night shift for me, because every night that I was awake, I would text different friends, never expecting a response because it was the middle of the night. It was really just this feeling, like, you guys know I'm so expressive. Here I am, like, putting my story out on YouTube. I'm like this with my friends in real life too. And I just would send them messages just because I needed to know that somebody I loved heard me. So I would send texts or voice messages, and every night, man, my friends were up. Every night someone was responding and carrying me through this and crying with me and sharing their stories and encouraging me. And so I was never alone. Every night that I was up crying and in shock, I was never alone. And it was really, like I said, my friends joke, God had them on the night shift. It was like, he really did. I really needed that. I really needed to connect with other women. And I'm really grateful. And that leads me to, okay, so sorry, I wanted to say that. I wanted to get out there because I think that's part of the process as well, is once it's done, it's not done, right? Bleeding for weeks. And like I mentioned, for me, that was very dramatic, that I was up every night, like just sobbing through the night. And I couldn't stop talking to people. And I was just like, like processing everything. It was kind of crazy. But I say all of that. And then now I want to say the next thing is that when I came to tell people that I had miscarried, like on the internet, I wanted to just get it out there. You guys know how I am. I want to move forward. And I wanted to share. I really wanted to share. I'm so used to connecting with you guys for the last decade. But obviously things have been different in the last year, and I was very, very scared because of that. I was nervous as to what people were going to say to me, or if they were just going to add to the horrible pain I was already feeling. And I have been shocked because it's been the exact opposite. The support and the love that I've received through you guys online, but then also in real life, has been incredible. And so this is kind of something I want to touch on as well, that my mom brought up when I was talking to her about the idea of possibly sharing this story. You know, one thing she said to me was, she was like, not only could this be encouraging for other women going through miscarriages, she's like, but what about the women who haven't been through a miscarriage, who don't know how difficult it is? Because me sharing essentially is what allowed and opened the door for other people and other women to step up and support me. By not keeping it a secret, I opened the door for other people to support me. I opened the door for potentially a lot of scary things to come in, mean things being said, which they weren't. Praise the Lord. I'm very grateful for that. But it's scary, sharing intimate things and putting yourself out there. But I just wanted to say in an encouragement, kind of two parts there. One, if you have not been through a miscarriage and you have a friend that goes through it, I need you to know from me, it's life-changing. I don't want to say the word traumatizing, because trauma also infers like I'm stamped with this forever. And in some ways I am, but maybe you get what I mean. It was traumatizing going through it. And it was so deeply painful, mentally, physically, and emotionally. And so if you have a friend that goes through that, I want to encourage you to really step up, cover them in love and prayer, and offer to bring them a meal. Dude, I have been in church my whole life, and I've had a few times where people have offered to do meal trains, including after we had Logan. Our church tried so many times to bring us food, and we just didn't feel like we needed it. We were like, no, we're good. Like, I didn't really want the food. I'm so picky, especially at that time, and we're going to be going back into that. So picky about my health and the food that I was eating. It was like, I don't want people to bring me random food, and I don't want to like not eat their food, so no thanks. But this time, like I mentioned, I was coming out of already being on survival mode, and then it felt like getting kicked in the face. So I really was having a hard time functioning, and so many people stepping up to cover me in prayer, to support me, to tell me stories. I say me, it's us, but it's me. I think you get that. It's both. Honestly crawling out of the woodworks to support me. And then I had multiple friends bring us meals to our house. And like I said, I've never participated in that. And it meant so much during, to just be having such a hard time feeding my son, feeding myself, doing any of it. And then to have people bring food, you know, and I had another friend write a handwritten letter, and I had other friends just sending me Bible verses, and another friend giving me tea. And so I say all of that. I keep saying I say all of that, but I'm really trying to hit those 2 points that if you have a friend that's going through this, I want to encourage you to think of how you can support them, even if it's small, because it's not small. Letting them know you're praying for them, sending them encouraging verses, bringing them a meal, bringing them, in my case, a friend brought me tea. This is actually one of the teas that a friend brought me. She gave me a variety pack, and I drink it, and it makes you feel good to know that someone was thinking of you when you were in so much pain. So I say it for that. And then I also say it if you're someone who maybe sometimes doesn't want to share things that you're going through with loved ones. I'm not talking about the internet. Not everyone is supposed to get on the internet and share their stories, but I'm talking about like with loved ones. If you're someone who still tends to shut down, to each their own, everybody processes differently. But if you're resonating with this, I want to encourage you to share with others when you're struggling, because that's where you give people the opportunity to step up and help you. And taking help can be hard sometimes, and you feel guilty, and you know everybody's got their problems, and you don't want to throw a wrench in anyone's day or their life, and like you want them to be okay too. But everyone hits weak points in life sometimes. And you know what I told myself through this is that I would want to be there for someone. I would want to do that for someone else that was hurting if they needed it and they wanted it. And it's opened my eyes even more to the importance of things like, you know, meal trains, and just showing your friends that you support them, because I've participated in meal trains for other people, but I'm not going to lie, I didn't even realize how much of like, how do you word this? Like, I didn't realize how much I was blessing them. It was kind of just like, okay, this is what you do. Like, sure, I'll add to the meal train, but I didn't understand the gravity of how helpful that was for that family or that person. And now that I've experienced it, I've received help in a time of need, I will see meal trains and just things like that differently moving forward, because it really meant a lot to me. And I'm sure that some of those people that brought me meals are watching this. And so I hope that makes you feel good that it really impacted me that much. So yeah, I guess the 2 things I want to say in closing. The first one is another reason that I had decided to share, and what I really wanted to say was that, you know, as I kept thinking about it, I realized I've had 2 babies now, and one is still here, one is not, one's in heaven now. And I birthed both of them in my home in a bathtub. And I feel like there are so many ways this could have gone. And I feel really blessed and grateful that I got to essentially have another home birth with my second baby. I wasn't sure, like I said, if I was going to share this story, but one of the other things that weighed on me was just this feeling of like, if I don't have anything to be ashamed of, if this is so common and there is no shame supposedly, then why can't I tell the story? You know, I know that the story ended differently essentially than my first home birth, but as a believer, I believe in life after death. I believe that life goes on. This is just the way it went. If it really is that common, I didn't want to hide. So there's that. And then the second thing that I wanted to say is that I have no idea why this happened. We never do. We will never know what went down. But I will say, you know, a lot of women when they're in this position feel very like, I don't know what the word, clueless, if that's the word. Like they're like, what happened? And I just wanted to say that I don't necessarily feel that way for myself. I feel like while it could have been anything, like I mentioned, looking back at my life for the last year, looking at my health over the last 6 months, so honestly, details that are not meant for this video that I might be sharing here or on Patreon just because of the nature of the video. But nothing was the same this pregnancy. And so I actually do have things that I'm planning on changing and adjusting in my lifestyle, God willing, as we move forward to hopefully try and conceive again, if that's what He has for us. So I'm making some changes in my life right now and really trying to get things back to a place of where I was, like health-wise, rhythms, routines, prior to leaving Nashville. Our life was very set, very rhythmed. Like I said, I had a lot of very specific health routines that, if I'm being honest, went completely out the window when everything happened last year and we moved across the country and moved into my parents' basement. And our house is still so far from being set up, although we've done so much of the renovations. It's not like a home yet, if that makes sense. Not in the way that Nashville was, because we had been there for a while and we had really had time to set up and get into those rhythms. And so my goal over the next couple of months is to, I keep saying, tend to my garden. I see my body as a garden, and the garden has been nutritionally depleted and stomped on a lot in this last year. Like I mentioned earlier, I think there was part of me that took life for granted and just assumed it would be fine. And I realize, again, like, things are fine for a lot of people. I just really want you guys to understand before anyone comments this, I am not blaming myself. That's not what I'm saying. But I am not someone who ignores, like, the facts of the situation and my gut. And my gut and the facts point me towards the fact that my garden has been very stressed and nutritionally depleted in the last year. The miscarriage could be a completely different, unknown reason. I just know that all I can do is take care of myself, and this happening just made me feel like I really need to put that emphasis on caring for myself, let my body heal, and then we re-enter hopefully back in to try to conceive. Now, some of you guys might be like, I don't understand. I thought you were already preparing for baby number 2 since like last year. I was trying. I was really giving it my best effort, and that's where we go back to grace, right? I'm giving myself grace because I don't even know if any of my thoughts are actually correct. But even if they are, I've been trying my best the last year to do the best I can. And as a mother, as a wife, as just a human, as a person trying to make new friends and build a new community. And so we're not planning on waiting long, but I am going to wait for about 2 to 3 months. That's the plan, till we actually actively try again, because I need to take care of myself. And like I mentioned, I don't mean that in a vague way. I've actually got really specific things that we've already started implementing. Like, I'm not even kidding, like a day or 2 after I miscarried. That's pretty much it. I keep saying I'm wrapping it up, and then I just keep going. But what a trip. I said online that it's been a wild few weeks, like so many emotions, sadness, gratitude, peace, anger at moments. I felt so supported, in prayer and love, and it's just been wild. I never thought I'd be sharing this story, but here I am, and I really just wanted to share it because I want to move forward. I feel like that's all I can do, really. I'm grateful for the time that I had with our baby. It's very surreal, this whole experience. It's probably like one of the main words I would use to cover it is surreal. And if you're going through this right now, I know I've seen comments on my page, like the other day, someone had mentioned that they had just started bleeding and they weren't sure what was happening. And, if you're going through any of this, I pray that you're able to find peace and comfort through this journey, through stories with other women. And I want to encourage you to connect and share with the women that you love what is going on. Share your story. Don't suffer alone. I realize that can be scary, believe me, because putting yourself out there in any way, I'm not just talking about the internet, I mean like even relationally, it can feel scary because you don't know if the other person is going to respond in a way that belittles you or makes your situation seem like you're being, too emotional, blowing things up, or, they shut you down. It can be scary. But what can also happen is what's happened to me. People could step up, people could support you, and you're only going to find out and experience that support and that love by opening up to your loved ones, by sharing with them what you've gone through. I keep hearing from everyone, it's so common to miscarry, especially obviously within the first trimester. But I hear so many women say they felt so alone through the process. And like I told my sister-in-law, I think sometimes that can be because we don't share. Maybe we didn't share the life in the first place, so it's weird to be like, oh yeah, by the way, I was pregnant, now I'm miscarrying. or maybe it's just because it feels shameful. But I want to say that it's been like healing and supportive and peaceful and encouraging and just all of those words by sharing. And at first I had that feeling of like, this is why people don't share. Like, why did I share this? And then that feeling, I have to say, went away pretty fast, because as I processed through the next couple of days, I was like, no, I shared because I wanted to share this life, and because I knew that if I miscarried, I would have a hard time not sharing that as well, because it would be very consuming, which it has been. I'm glad that we got to celebrate our baby's life, and I'm glad that people walked beside us and mourned our baby's life with us. It's weird that this is part of my story now, so it will live with me forever. And your guys' support has also meant so much. Reading your comments, reading your messages and your stories, and just filled with hope and pain and struggle and just all of it. And I just appreciate you guys sharing with me as well. That's it for this video. I actually just decided while filming this that I'm going to film my Patreon video right now. I'm going to talk through some of my thoughts around the miscarriage and what's been going on a little bit, and my perspective of like my health and all of that. So I'm just gonna roll right into that. I'm gonna go now. I will see you guys in the comments and all over just other places on the internet. And God willing, I will see you back here soon. Bye guys.